The napkin was wrong. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the glass, not the scent, not the 1,000 alien voices echoing across the hall. Just the napkin, folded into a sharp, unnatural triangle, its edges aligned too perfectly, like it had been measured instead of placed. No one else seemed to care. I didn't touch it. I just looked at it, the way you look at something that doesn't belong in the room but no one's reacting to. Like a chair facing the wrong direction. Like a door that should be closed but isn't. Then I picked up the glass. The smell hit me before the rim reached my lips. Sweet, faintly metallic, buried under something floral that tried too hard to hide it. I'd never trained for poisons. I wasn't that kind of envoy. But I grew up near a refinery back on Earth, and some smells don't leave you. This was one of them. Poison. I didn't react. Didn't even blink. I just held the glass there for a second longer than necessary, letting the realization settle without letting it show. The napkin, the drink, the timing. Too clean. Someone wanted me to notice, or wanted to see if I would. Around me, the banquet roared on. Laughter, clinking glass, languages folding into each other through translation implants. No one was watching me. Not obviously. I lowered the glass slightly, just enough to glance at the napkin again. Same fold, same precision. And now, I was sure of it. There was something inside the crease. A line, a mark, hidden unless you knew where to look. A signal. Not for me. That was the part that settled in the deepest. I wasn't supposed to understand it. I wasn't supposed to hesitate. I was supposed to drink. I exhaled once, slow, steady. Then I raised the glass again. I wasn't supposed to be here. That thought settled in as I lowered the glass just enough to delay the inevitable, buying myself a few seconds to observe the room like I actually belonged in it. I didn't. My name is Ryan Hale, Junior Envoy, temporary assignment, replacement, the kind of name that gets slotted into a seat when someone more important suddenly stops breathing. Ambassador Linton had been the original invite. He'd spent years building relationships with the Valari Imperium, carefully, cautiously, like a man stacking glass in a room full of tremors. Then, 3 days before departure, he collapsed in his apartment. Official cause, cardiac failure. Unofficially, no one said anything, which usually meant everything. So they sent me. Just observe, they told me. Don't offend anyone. Don't draw attention. Right. I stood out the moment I walked into the hall. The Capitol floated above a gas giant, suspended in a ring of gravity engines that hummed so quietly you felt them more than heard them. The banquet hall itself stretched impossibly wide, a cathedral of curved glass and living metal, its ceiling shimmering with slow-moving constellations, real-time projections of the system outside. 40 species, maybe more. Some seated, some hovering, some anchored to the floor by limbs that looked like roots or blades. Light bent differently around each of them, colors shifting with bioluminescent skin, reflective armor, translucent tissues pulsing with internal rhythms. And then there was me. Human. Average height. Average build. One suit that fit badly at the shoulders and worse at the cuffs. No enhancements. No visible augmentations. No biological advantages worth mentioning. I might as well have been invisible. Except I wasn't. They looked. Not openly. Not rudely. But I felt it. The subtle shift in posture, the fractional pause in conversations, the way translation devices hesitated half a beat longer when rendering my words. Humans were new. Not in the sense of first contact. We'd been in the network for decades, but new in terms of relevance. A species that had arrived too fast, learned too quickly, and hadn't yet decided what it wanted to be. To them, we were noise. To me, they were everything. I sat at the far end of one of the long crystalline tables, positioned just close enough to the central axis to be seen, but far enough to be ignored. Classic placement for a disposable guest. To my right, a Valari noble unfolded himself into his seat with deliberate elegance. Tall, thin, skin like brushed chrome, reflecting the ambient light in fractured patterns. For eyes, arranged in a vertical line, each one focusing independently. He didn't look at me at first. Then, slowly, the third eye from the top rotated in my direction. "You are the replacement," he said. His voice came through my implant smooth and neutral, stripped of whatever tonal nuances existed in his actual speech. "Temporary," I said. "Temporary things," he replied, "are rarely worth observing. Depends on how long they last." That earned me a pause. Two of his eyes blinked in sequence. Evaluation, maybe, or mild irritation. You will find, he continued, that duration is not a metric your species controls in this environment. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because I'd already learned that silence unsettled them more than disagreement. Humans filled space with words. When we didn't, it made people wonder why. He turned away. Conversation over. Good. I didn't need allies. I needed information. And right now, all my attention was drawn forward, to the center of the hall. To her. The Empress didn't sit like the others. She didn't shift, didn't gesture, didn't engage in the constant low-level motion that defined the rest of the room. She was still in a way that felt deliberate, like gravity anchored itself around her instead of the other way around. Tall, even-seated, darker than the other Valari, her skin closer to polished steel than chrome. The same four eyes, but brighter, sharper, each one holding a different layer of awareness. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Every movement in the hall adjusted around her. Conversations aligned. Servants moved in perfect timing. Even the ambient lighting seemed calibrated to her position. Control without effort. Power without display. The Empress played a deadly game at a banquet, but she never raised her voice to do it. I watched her the way you watch a storm from a distance. Not because you think you're safe, but because you don't yet understand how close it is. And then it happened. Not a movement. Not really. A flicker. One of her eyes shifted, not to me, to the napkin. That was it. A fraction of a second. Easy to miss. Impossible to misinterpret. She had seen it. Or maybe she had been the one who put it there. I felt something settle in my chest. Not fear. Not exactly. Recognition. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. The poison glass. The folded napkin. The positioning. The timing. This wasn't an accident. It was a setup, and I was already inside it. If you've watched this far, then this story is really interesting to you. Please confirm it by clicking like under this video. It doesn't cost you anything, but it will help me understand what story to publish for you next. Let's move on. I could have put the glass down. That was the simplest option. The safest. Pretend I noticed nothing. Let the moment pass. Walk away from whatever game I had just been invited into. That's what a better envoy would have done. That's what Ambassador Lennon would have done. I wasn't him. I looked at the napkin again. Still folded too perfectly. Still wrong. And now I could see it clearly, the faint line inside the crease. Not decoration, not accidental. A deliberate mark, pressed into the fabric at an angle that only revealed itself if you were already suspicious. A signal, not for me. That thought kept circling. If it wasn't for me, then who was it for? Someone else at this table? A servant? One of the nobles? Someone watching from a distance, waiting to see if the mark had been acknowledged? Or someone expecting me to miss it? I rolled the glass slightly between my fingers. The liquid inside caught the shifting light from above, reflecting the artificial constellations across its surface. Beautiful, clean, deadly. My reflection warped in it, distorted, stretched, barely recognizable. Fitting. You are still not drinking, the noble to my right said without turning. Taking my time. Time, he replied, is another resource your species overvalues. Maybe, I said. Or maybe we just know how to use it. That earned me a full glance this time. All four eyes. Curiosity now. Or irritation. Hard to tell. I didn't wait for a response. Instead, I lifted the glass again, slowly this time. Not hesitant. Measured. Across the hall, the Empress hadn't moved. But I could feel it. Her attention. Not obvious. Not direct. But there, like pressure building behind a sealed door. She was watching. Not me. The choice. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about the poison. Not really. Anyone could poison a glass. Anyone could remove a guest quietly, cleanly, without spectacle. If they wanted me gone, I wouldn't be sitting here with a warning folded neatly beside my drink. No, this was about reaction. About observation. Someone had set the board. Someone had placed the pieces. And now they were waiting to see what I would do. Refuse the drink? I exposed the signal. Hesitate? I acknowledge the trap. Make a scene? I disrupt the room, but reveal I understand something is wrong. Every option said something. Every reaction fed the game. I exhaled slowly. There was one move they weren't expecting. I looked directly at the Empress. This time, all four of her eyes were on me. No pretense. No misdirection. Just focus. Cold. Precise. Waiting. Good. Let her. I raised the glass slightly, as if in a silent acknowledgement. Not a toast. Not respect. Recognition. You set this. I see it. Now watch. The noble beside me shifted slightly, sensing the change without understanding it. You would be wise, he said quietly, to follow established protocol. I didn't look at him. I'm not here for protocol. And then I drank. Not a sip. Not a cautious taste. I tilted the glass back and swallowed everything in one motion, letting the liquid burn its way down my throat while keeping my eyes locked on hers. No hesitation. No flinch. No break in eye contact. The hall didn't go silent, but the space around me did. Conversations continued, but I could feel the shift. The subtle pull of attention, like gravity adjusting in real time. The noble beside me froze. Across the table, a figure paused mid-gesture. And at the center, the Empress didn't move. But something changed. Not in her posture, not in her expression, in the smallest detail possible. One of her eyes, upper right, narrowed by a fraction. Not approval, not anger, something else. Something I hadn't seen before. I set the empty glass down. The sound was soft. Too soft for a room this large. But it landed anyway. Clear. Final. And then the poison hit. It wasn't pain. That was the first thing I noticed. I'd expected pain. Burning, choking, something violent and immediate. That's what poison is supposed to do. Announce itself, make a scene, force a reaction. This didn't. It spread. Slow. Precise. Like something unfolding inside my bloodstream instead of attacking it. A warmth that wasn't warmth, a pressure behind my eyes, a quiet distortion at the edges of my vision. I stayed still, breathing steady, shoulders relaxed, hands resting on the table like nothing had changed. The worst thing I could do now was react. You. The noble beside me started, then stopped. Good. Let him process it. Let all of them process it. I kept my eyes on the Empress. That hadn't changed. That couldn't change. If I broke now, if I looked away, if I coughed, if I so much as blinked too hard, I'd confirm exactly what they expected. That I was out of my depth. That I didn't understand the game. That I was just another disposable piece. My fingers tingled. Not numb, sharp. Hyper-aware. Like every nerve had been turned up a fraction too high. I could feel the surface of the table in detail now. The microscopic imperfections in the crystalline structure pressing into my skin. My vision blurred slightly. The constellations above stretched, smeared into lines of light that moved just a little too slowly. Still no pain. That was worse. Across from me, one of the other delegates had stopped mid-conversation. Not obviously, no one here did anything obviously, but I saw it. The way their posture locked, the way their attention shifted without turning their head. They were watching, not openly, but enough. The noble beside me leaned closer, his voice barely audible. What have you done? I almost smiled. I finished my drink. His upper eyes widened. Just slightly. Enough. That was not. He stopped himself, recalibrating. That was not intended for you to consume in full. There was no instruction manual, I said. You were marked. I noticed. And yet you. I made a choice. That seemed to unsettle him more than the act itself. Good. Let it. The warmth in my chest deepened. Not spreading anymore, settling. Like whatever I'd ingested had reached the part of me it was designed for. My heartbeat slowed. That was new. Not weaker. Controlled. Like something external had reached in and adjusted the rhythm directly. I tightened my jaw slightly, forcing my body to maintain its baseline. Across the hall, something shifted. Not in the crowd. In the center, the Empress moved. Not dramatically. Not enough for most of the room to notice. But I saw it. Her hand lifted from the armrest of her throne, just a few centimeters. 2 fingers extended, then curled inward in a motion so small it could have been mistaken for a reflex. It wasn't. It was a command. The response was immediate. A figure appeared at my side before I registered the movement. One of the Imperial attendants. Tall, silent, efficient. I hadn't seen them approach. That alone told me enough. Something cold pressed against the inside of my wrist. An injector. I didn't pull away. Didn't look at it. Didn't acknowledge it at all. If this was the next move, I wasn't going to interrupt it. The needle punctured cleanly. Sharp. Controlled. Then, cold. Not temperature, sensation. Like liquid ice flooding directly into my veins, colliding with the slow-burning warmth already there. The effect was immediate. The pressure behind my eyes snapped back into focus. The distortion vanished. The heightened sensation dulled to normal. My heartbeat adjusted again. Back to mine. Not theirs. I exhaled once. Quiet. Controlled. The attendant stepped back without a word. Gone as quickly as they had appeared. The Terran delegate appears unwell, the Empress said. Her voice carried. Not loud. Not forced. Precise. Every conversation within range adjusted instantly, bending around the statement like it had always been part of the room. He will be attended to, she continued. Move him to the Amber Wing. Amber Wing. Even I knew that name. Not from experience. From briefings. A section of the palace reserved for individuals of interest. Not importance. Interest. That distinction mattered. The noble beside me leaned in again, closer this time. His voice dropped lower. What are you? He asked. I finally looked at him. Really looked. Confusion. Not anger. Not disdain. Confusion. I'm the one who drank it, I said. I pushed myself to my feet. Slowly. No rush. No sign of weakness. The room tilted for half a second. Just enough to remind me I wasn't entirely fine, but I corrected for it before it became visible. 2 attendants moved into position on either side of me. Guides, not guards. That was important too. I didn't resist. Didn't speak. Didn't look back. But I felt it. The shift in the room. Subtle. Incomplete. But real. Something had changed. And at the center of it, the Empress was still watching me. The Amber Wing wasn't amber. It was quiet. That was the first thing I noticed as the doors sealed behind me. Not the color, not the architecture, not the subtle shift in gravity that suggested this part of the palace operated on a different system entirely. Silence. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of presence. No background movement. No distant conversations bleeding through walls. No hum of activity like in the banquet hall. Just a controlled, deliberate stillness that felt engineered. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary. The attendants had already left. Of course they had. Whatever happened next wasn't meant to be witnessed. I flexed my hand slowly, testing for any lingering effects from the poison. My body felt normal. Too normal. Like something had been reset rather than healed. That bothered me. I stepped further into the room. Everything here was designed to observe without appearing to. The walls weren't reflective, but they caught light in a way that made depth hard to judge. The floor adjusted slightly under my weight, not enough to destabilize, just enough to register. Someone was always aware of where you stood. Good to know. I moved toward the table, and there it was. The napkin. Same fold, same precision, placed beside a new glass. Untouched. My hand paused halfway to the surface. That wasn't coincidence. They had moved me here. They had prepared this room. And they had replicated the detail. Not removed it. Not hidden it. Copied it. I picked up the napkin this time. Carefully. The fold held. Tight. Intentional. I opened it slowly. There it was. The marking. Clearer now. Not just a line, a symbol. Angular. Minimal. Designed to be recognized by someone who already knew what it meant. I didn't. But I knew what it wasn't. It wasn't decoration. It wasn't random. And it wasn't meant for me. Which meant someone expected the original recipient to survive long enough to see it again. Or to understand it before it was too late. I set it back down exactly as I found it. Same angle. Same fold. If this was a signal, I wasn't going to interrupt it. The door chimed. Not a knock. A tone. Low. Resonant. Precise. Higher than the attendants. Lower than the nobles. Something in between. I didn't move right away. Just turned slightly toward the sound. Come in, I said. The door opened, and she stepped inside. No guards. No attendants. No announcement. The Empress didn't fill the room the way she did in the hall. She compressed it, like the space adjusted to her instead of expanding. Up close, the differences were clearer. Her skin wasn't reflective like the others. It absorbed light, diffused it. Her eyes didn't glow as brightly here, but they focused harder, sharper, less ceremonial, more real. She didn't speak immediately, just walked further in, stopping a few steps away from me. Close enough to matter, far enough to control the distance. You drank all of it, she said. Not a question. I shrugged slightly. There didn't seem to be a rule against it. There were expectations. I'm not from here. A pause. Longer this time. Her eyes shifted, not to me, to the napkin, then back. You saw it. Hard not to, and yet you ignored it. I didn't ignore it, I said. I chose not to follow it. That mattered. I could see it land. Not visibly, not emotionally, structurally. like a variable in a calculation she hadn't accounted for. I became aware of the interference 17 minutes before the banquet began, she said. A servant compromised. A signal placed. Not enough time to remove either without revealing the attempt. So you let it play out. I observed, and I was the test subject. You were the variable. I let that sit for a second. Fair enough. You expected me to hesitate, I said. Yes. Or refuse. Yes. Or make a scene. Yes. I nodded. And instead, I drank it. You consumed a lethal agent in full view of a hostile environment while maintaining direct eye contact with the highest authority present. She said it like a report. Clean. Accurate. Detached. Sounds worse when you say it like that. It is worse. Another pause. Different this time. Not analytical. Not distant. Something else. You altered the outcome, she said. How? You forced visibility. I frowned slightly. Of what? Of intent. She stepped closer. One step. Enough to change the dynamic. The signal was not for you, she continued. It was placed to identify compliance. To isolate a predictable response. And I didn't give one. No. She looked at the napkin again. Then back at me. You disrupted the pattern. I exhaled slowly. Good. That was when it shifted. Subtle, but undeniable. Her upper left eye, the one I'd seen flicker in the hall, focused on me with a different intensity. Not evaluation. Recognition. Not a status. Of behavior. You were not supposed to survive, she said. I gathered that. And yet, you are here. Because you gave the order. No, she said quietly. Because you made it necessary. That was new. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. The room held the silence. Then, her gaze dropped. Not to the glass. Not to the door. To the napkin. Again. This, she said, almost to herself, was not meant for you. I know. Then why didn't you follow it? I looked at her. Really looked this time. You said it yourself, I said. It wasn't meant for me. Another pause. And this one stayed. She didn't look away from the napkin. That was the first sign something had shifted. Up until now, everything about her had been controlled, measured, calculated, precise. Every word placed exactly where it needed to be, every silence deliberate. Now she was still, not in control, considering. You were not the intended recipient, she said again, quieter this time. Not for me, not for the room, for herself. I figured that out, I said. Her eyes moved, one at a time, back to me. All available projections indicated a different outcome, she continued. Compliance, recognition, withdrawal. Yeah, I said. That sounds like the safer move. It is the correct move. I shook my head slightly. Not always. That earned me another pause. Longer. Different. You chose exposure over survival, she said. I chose not to play along. You assumed there was a game you could opt out of. I assume, I said, that if someone sets the rules without telling me, I don't have to follow them. That landed. Not like before. This time it stayed. She took another step closer. Now we were within reach. Not touching, but close enough that the space between us felt intentional. You understood the risk, she said. Yes. You understood the signal was not meant for you. Yes. And you chose to act anyway. Yes. Why? That was the first real question she'd asked. Not analytical. Not rhetorical. Direct. I thought about it for a second. Not long. Just enough. Because whoever placed that signal, I said, nodding slightly toward the napkin, expected a certain kind of person to be sitting in that chair. She didn't interrupt. Didn't react. Just listened. Someone cautious, I continued. Someone predictable. Someone who would see the warning, hesitate, and adjust. That is how survival works here. Yeah, I said, but I'm not from here. Silence again, but not empty. She was processing, reevaluating. You changed the equation, she said finally. I changed my move. You changed the outcome. Same thing. No, she said. Not here. Her gaze sharpened. For 7 years, every action in this court has followed a pattern. Every response predictable. Every threat contained within known variables. She gestured slightly, barely emotion, but enough to include the room, the palace, the entire system around us. This environment functions because it is understood. And I'm not, I said. No. That word carried weight. Not dismissal. Not insult. Recognition. You introduced uncertainty, she continued. Not through strength. Not through influence. Through deviation. I drank a glass. You refused alignment. That was the difference. I could see it now. She wasn't focused on what I did. She was focused on what it meant. The signal, she said, glancing again at the napkin, was designed to identify compliance within a controlled structure. And I broke that. You revealed it. Another distinction. I let out a slow breath. Then whoever set this up, I said. They didn't expect me. They did not expect anyone like you. Good. That almost sounded like approval. Almost. Her eyes shifted again, subtle, but I caught it. Not to the napkin. Not to me. To the door. Just for a fraction of a second. Then back. They are still here, she said. Not a question. A statement. Of course they are, I said. They set the board. They're not going to walk away just because I made a different move. They will adjust. So will I. That earns something new. Not in her words. In her posture. A slight shift. Less rigid. Less distant. You are not what your file suggested, she said. I get that a lot. Your file described you as replaceable. That part's still true. No, she said. Flat. Immediate. Decisive. That assessment is no longer accurate. I raised an eyebrow. Because I drank poison? Because you changed the outcome of a controlled scenario without authority, without support, and without prior knowledge. That's one way to look at it. It is the only way that matters here. Another pause. But this one didn't feel like distance. It felt like alignment. Not agreement. Recognition. She stepped even closer now. Close enough that I could see the subtle differences in her eyes. The way each one tracked something slightly different, processing multiple layers at once. You forced me to act, she said. I thought that was your call. It was not, she said quietly. Not originally. That made me pause. You were going to let it happen, I said. Yes. No intervention. Observation only. And then I drank it. And then you made inaction impossible. There it was. That's why you saved me. No, she said again. That is why I had to. A distinction that mattered more than it should have. I nodded slowly. Okay. She studied me for a moment longer. Then, her gaze shifted back to the napkin one last time. This was not meant for you, she repeated. I know. And yet, she didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I looked at it too. The fold. The mark. The signal. Whoever it was meant for. I said. They didn't get the chance. No, she said. And now? Now came the part that mattered. Her eyes returned to me. All four. Focused. Aligned. Now, she said, you are no longer invisible. That wasn't a compliment. It wasn't a warning either. It was worse. It was a fact. I looked at the napkin one last time. Same fold. Same mark. Same quiet message that had never been meant for me. Whoever was supposed to sit there, I said, they were meant to understand this. Yes. And follow it. Yes. I nodded slowly, which means they already knew the rules. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. The room felt smaller now. Not physically, but in possibility. The range of outcomes had narrowed, compressed into something sharper. You said I forced visibility, I continued. That I exposed intent. You did. Then here's what I think, I said, turning fully toward her. That signal wasn't just a warning. It was a filter. Her eyes sharpened. Explain. It separates people who play the game from people who don't. Silence. Real silence this time. Not strategic. Not measured. Still. And you, she said quietly, chose not to play. I chose not to follow someone else's script. Her gaze held mine. Longer than before. Deeper. Then understand this, Ryan Hale, she said. By refusing the signal, you did not step outside the game. I waited. You changed it. That settled in. Not like a threat. Like gravity. I glanced at the napkin again, then back at her. Good, I said. Her upper left eye flickered. Recognition. Not of status. Not of power. Of choice. And for the first time since I arrived, she didn't look at me like I didn't belong. Thank you for listening to this story to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Write in the comments what moment in this story impressed you the most. And also check out the other videos that just appeared on your screen. See you in the next video.